A dusty recipe book, hidden in the shadows of a quaint village bakery, holds a curse that poisons more than just the palate. Welcome to Miss Marple and the Cursed Recipe Book, a chilling mystery that will keep you guessing. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and dive into the suspense. If you're hooked, hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us. Chapter 1. The Scent of Trouble. In the sleepy village of Willoughby Green, nestled in the rolling hills of England's countryside, the air was thick with the aroma of fresh-baked bread and blooming lavender. It was June 1953, and the village was abuzz with preparations for the annual summer fete, where stalls would overflow with jams, cakes, and knitted goods, and the laughter of children would echo across the green. But beneath the cheerful bustle, a whisper of unease stirred. Centered on the village's beloved bakery, the Golden Loaf, rumours swirled of a strange recipe book, its pages said to hold secrets that brought misfortune to those who used it. Into this quiet storm stepped Miss Jane Marple, the elderly spinster from St. Mary Mead, whose sharp eyes and sharper mind could unravel even the most tangled mysteries. Miss Marple arrived in Willoughby Green at the invitation of her niece, Margaret Trent, who ran a small tea room on the village's main street. Margaret's letter had been brief but urgent. "Aunt Jane, something's amiss at the bakery. People are falling ill, and there's talk of a cursed book. Please come." Never one to shy away from a puzzle, Miss Marple had packed her knitting bag and sensible hat, boarding the train with a flutter of curiosity. As she stepped onto the platform, the summer sun warmed her face, but the faint chill in her niece's words lingered. A young girl, Sally Brooks, met her with a shy curtsy sent by Margaret to guide her. "Welcome, Miss Marple," Sally said, her freckled cheeks flushed. "The tea room's this way, but mind the bakery. Folks say it's bad luck now." As they walked along the cobbled lane, Sally chattered about the fate and the bakery's troubles. "It started a month ago," she said, her voice low. "Mrs. Elsie Harper, who owns the Golden Loaf, baked a batch of scones that made half the village sick. Then Mr. Tompkins, the butcher, ate her bread and was laid up for days. They say it's that old book she found in the shop's attic." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly in her bag, her mind already turning. Poisoned scones and cursed books. In her experience, curses were often human misdeeds cloaked in superstition, like the time St. Mary Mead's haunted well turned out to be a smuggler's hideout. "Fascinating," she murmured. "And what do the villagers make of it?" Sally shrugged. "Some say it's witchcraft. Others think Elsie's just careless. But she's scared, Miss Marple. Won't open the bakery now." At Margaret's tea room, a cosy nook with lace curtains and mismatched teacups, Miss Marple settled into a chair by the window. Margaret, a brisk woman in her 40s with her aunt's keen eyes, poured Darjeeling and explained further. "It's not just the illnesses, Aunt Jane. Elsie found this old recipe book, bound in leather, hidden behind a loose board in the attic. She tried a few recipes, scones, bread, a pie, and every time someone fell ill. The doctor, Mr. Gregory Lane, says it's food poisoning, but Elsie swears the ingredients were fresh. Now she's locked the book away, and the village is in a panic." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind sifting through possibilities. Food poisoning could be accidental, but a pattern suggested intent. "And this book?" she asked. "Has anyone else seen it?" Margaret shook her head. "Only Elsie and her apprentice, young Peter Finch. He's been acting odd, though. Skittish, like he's hiding something." Determined to see the bakery for herself, Miss Marple suggested a visit. Margaret led her across the green, where fete preparations were in full swing. Women stringing bunting, men hauling tables. The Golden Loaf stood at the corner, its sign faded, its windows shuttered. Elsie Harper, a stout woman in her 60s with flour-dusted hands and worry-lined eyes, let them in reluctantly. "I don't know what to make of it, Miss Marple," she said, wringing her apron. "That book. It's got recipes in handwriting I can't place, some in Latin." I thought they'd charm the fate judges, but now I'm cursed." She showed them the attic, a dusty space cluttered with crates. The book, locked in a tin box, was old, its leather cover cracked, its pages yellowed. Miss Marple examined it carefully, noting strange symbols in the margins. Herbal recipes, perhaps, or something darker. Downstairs, Peter Finch, a lanky lad of 19 with nervous eyes, was sweeping the floor. Miss Marple greeted him warmly, but he flinched at her questions about the book. "I just helped Mrs. Harper bake," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Didn't read it much." His fingers twitched, and Miss Marple noticed a faint stain on his cuff. Green, like crushed herbs. She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead where a gardener's poison ivy rash had exposed a theft. Small details often betrayed big secrets. "You must be busy with the fate," she said, watching him closely. Peter nodded and hurried out, claiming an errand. As they left the bakery, Miss Marple and Margaret stopped at the village pub, the Thirsty Plough, to gauge the mood. The air was thick with pipe smoke and gossip. Mrs. Violet Grayson, the postmistress and chief gossip, held court at a corner table. "It's that book, mark my words," she declared. Old Mrs. Carver, who owned the bakery years ago, was said to dabble in herbs, dangerous ones. "Her recipes are cursed." At another table, Dr. Gregory Lane, a stern man with a clipped beard, dismissed the talk. "Nonsense. It's just bad flour or unclean water. Elsie's no witch." Miss Marple listened, her needles clicking, noting the divide. Superstition versus skepticism, both masking the truth. Back at the tea room, Miss Marple jotted notes in her pocketbook. The book's symbols, Peter's nervousness, the green stain. Something was amiss, and it wasn't a curse. Was someone tampering with the recipes, using the book as a scapegoat? And who stood to gain from the bakery's ruin? The fate, just days away, would bring the village together, and Miss Marple sensed the shadow behind the book would strike again. She resolved to keep a close eye on Peter and visit Dr. Lane's surgery to learn more about the illnesses. The truth, she knew, was like a poorly baked loaf, crumbly on the surface but solid at its core, waiting to be sliced open. Chapter 2. The doctor's diagnosis. The morning sun spilled over Willoughby Green, painting the village in hues of gold as the summer fete drew closer, its preparations lending a festive hum to the cobblestone streets. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, walked briskly toward the village surgery, her mind fixed on the mysterious illnesses tied to the Golden Loaf's cursed recipe book, the green stain on Peter Finch's cuff, the strange symbols in the old book, and Elsie Harper's fear had set her senses tingling. Today, she aimed to consult Dr. Gregory Lane, hoping his medical insights might reveal whether the bakery's troubles were mere accidents or something more sinister. The spire of St. Mary's Church, visible in the distance, reminded her of past mysteries. But this puzzle, rooted in flour and herbs, was proving just as tangled. The surgery, a neat brick building beside the village green, smelled of antiseptic and old books. Dr. Lane, a wiry man in his 50s with a clipped beard and sharp eyes, greeted Miss Marple with a curt nod. "Margaret said you'd come, Miss Marple," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "Curious about the bakery business, I presume." His tone was brisk, almost dismissive, but Miss Marple's gentle smile disarmed him. "Indeed, Doctor. These illnesses, most unusual for a bakery with Elsie's reputation. What's your diagnosis?" Lane led her to his office, a cluttered room with medical journals stacked high and a faint scent of carbolic soap. He pulled out a ledger, detailing cases from the past month. 5 patients, he said, flipping pages, all with nausea, dizziness, some with rashes. First was Mrs. Grayson, after eating Elsie's scones, then Tompkins, the butcher, after her bread. 3 others followed, similar symptoms, all tied to the Golden Loaf. He shut the ledger with a snap. Food poisoning, likely from contaminated flour or water. Nothing cursed about it. Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. Noting the certainty in his voice, but also the way his fingers tapped the desk. A sign of unease, perhaps. "And the rashes?" she asked. "Could they suggest something herbal?" Lane frowned, his tapping pausing. "Possibly. Some plants cause skin reactions. But Elsie's no botanist. She bakes, not brews." Leaving the surgery, Miss Marple crossed the green, where fete preparations were in full swing. Women hung colourful banners, and a group of lads practised for the sack race. She spotted Peter Finch delivering a crate of rolls to a stall, his cap pulled low. Approaching, she called out, "Peter, a moment." He flinched, nearly dropping the crate, his eyes darting. "Got to run, Miss Marple," he mumbled, hurrying off. His avoidance only deepened her suspicions, especially after the green stain she'd seen. Was he tampering with ingredients, or merely a nervous youth caught in something bigger? Her next stop was the village hall, where the fete committee was meeting. Mrs. Violet Grayson, the postmistress, presided, her voice carrying as she delegated tasks. "We'll have no talk of curses at the fete," she declared, her pince-nez glinting. "Elsie's bakery must reopen, or we'll lose our best stall." The room buzzed with agreement. But Miss Marple noted the unease in some faces, particularly that of Mr. Harold Webb, a local farmer whose ruddy cheeks seemed paler today. He'd been one of the sick, she recalled, and his wife, seated beside him, clutched his arm tightly. Miss Marple approached them after the meeting, her tone warm. "Mr. Webb, I heard you were unwell after Elsie's bread. Feeling better?" Harold nodded gruffly. "Aye, just a bad turn. Don't believe in curses, mind." His wife, however, looked away, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Determined to learn more, Miss Marple visited the Golden Loaf, hoping to speak with Elsie. The bakery was still shuttered, but Elsie let her in, her face etched with worry. "I've burned those recipes," she said, leading Miss Marple to the kitchen. "But folks still won't come near." The tin box where the book had been kept was empty, its lock broken, suggesting someone had taken it. Miss Marple examined the kitchen, noting a faint herbal scent near the flour bins. Unusual for a bakery, a small jar tucked behind a sack caught her eye, labelled herb mix in a shaky hand. "What's this?" she asked. Elsie paled. "Peter brought it, said it was for flavouring. I never used it, I swear." Outside, Miss Marple paused by the bakery's back door, where a patch of wild herbs grew. Some with jagged leaves she recognised as potentially toxic. Had Peter, or someone else, harvested them for the cursed recipes? She recalled a similar incident in St. Mary Mead, where a mislabelled herb had caused a stir at a garden party. Returning to the tea room, she found Margaret serving tea to a small crowd. "Any luck, Aunt Jane?" Margaret asked quietly. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "A few crumbs, dear, but the loaf's not baked yet." The herbal jar, Peter's nervousness, and Dr. Lane's guarded manner suggested a deliberate act, but the motive remained elusive. Was someone targeting the bakery to ruin Elsie, or was the fate itself the goal? As evening fell, Miss Marple resolved to attend the fete's opening ceremony tomorrow, where the village would gather and secrets might spill like flour from a torn sack. She jotted notes in her pocketbook, listing Peter, Dr. Lane and the Webbs as key figures. The cursed book was no supernatural threat, she was certain, but a tool in a human scheme. The fete would be the perfect stage for the next clue, and Miss Marple intended to be there, watching closely as Willoughby Green's mystery unfolded. Chapter 3. The Fate's Opening. Gambit, the morning of the summer fete, painted Willoughby Green in a vibrant glow, with sunlight glinting off the dew-kissed cobblestones and the village green alive with the hum of anticipation. Colourful bunting fluttered between lampposts, and stalls brimmed with jars of ruby-red jam, golden honey, and intricately woven baskets. The air carried the sweet scent of caramelized sugar and the cheerful trill of a brass band tuning up near the maypole. Yet beneath this festive veneer, a shadow of unease lingered, tied to the cursed recipe book and the illnesses that had shuttered the Golden Loaf. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag slung over her arm, stood at the edge of the green, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd. The herbal jar, Peter Finch's nervous demeanour, and Dr. Gregory Lane's guarded diagnosis had tightened the threads of the mystery, and she sensed the fate's opening ceremony would reveal the next clue in this perplexing puzzle. Miss Marple had risen early at Margaret's tea room, her mind sifting through yesterday's discoveries. The green stain on Peter's cuff, the mysterious herb jar in the bakery, and the wild plants outside suggested someone was tampering with ingredients, using the so-called cursed book as a scapegoat. Dr. Lane's insistence on food poisoning seemed plausible, but his unease hinted at withheld truths. Was he protecting someone, or merely skeptical of village gossip? And the Webbs' discomfort, Harold's gruff dismissal, and his wife's anxious silence suggested they knew more about their illness than they let on. As she sipped her morning tea, Miss Marple resolved to observe the fate closely, where the village's tensions might bubble over like an overboiled pot. The green was a whirl of activity as she arrived with Margaret, who was busy delivering scones to a refreshment stall. Children darted about, clutching paper kites, while farmers in their Sunday best bartered over homemade cider. Miss Marple settled on a bench near the stage, her needles clicking softly as she watched the villagers gather for the opening ceremony. Mrs. Violet Grayson, the postmistress, took the stage, her voice booming with authority. "Welcome to our summer fete," she declared, her pince-nez glinting in the sun. "Let's celebrate Willoughby Green's bounty and put aside foolish talk of curses." The crowd cheered, but Miss Marple noted strained smiles among some, particularly Elsie Harper, who stood at the back, her hands twisting her apron. The Golden Loaf stall, usually a centerpiece, was absent, a stark reminder of the village's unease. Reverend Amos Cole, a portly man with a kind face, followed with a blessing, his words faltering as he mentioned the bakery's troubles. "Let us pray for unity," he said, glancing nervously at Elsie. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to Peter Finch, who lingered near a cider stall, his cap low and his hands stuffed in his pockets. His eyes darted toward the church, its spire a distant backdrop to the fete. She made a mental note to follow him later. His skittishness was becoming a pattern. Nearby, Dr. Lane stood with arms crossed, his expression stern as he watched the crowd. Miss Marple caught a fleeting glance between him and Harold Webb, who stood with his wife near a flower stall, their faces drawn. Was their illness tied to a grudge or something more calculated? As the ceremony ended, the fete burst into full swing, with games and laughter filling the air. Miss Marple wandered the stalls, her unassuming presence allowing her to eavesdrop unnoticed. At a jam stall, two women whispered about Elsie's misfortune. "She should have burned that book," one said. "My cousin ate her pie and was sick for days." Miss Marple paused, noting the exaggeration. Village gossip often inflated truths, but it pointed to fear. She approached Elsie, who was helping at a charity stall, her face pale. "You're brave to be here, Mrs. Harper," Miss Marple said gently. Elsie sighed, her voice low. "I had to show my face, Miss Marple, but folks still think I'm to blame. That book's gone now. Stolen, I reckon, from the tin box." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. A stolen book suggested someone wanted its secrets, or its infamy. Determined to investigate, Miss Marple slipped away to the bakery, which stood silent at the green's edge. The back door was unlocked, a careless oversight, and she entered the kitchen, where the faint herbal scent lingered. She examined the flour bins, finding a faint dusting of green powder mixed with the grains, barely noticeable, but suspicious. Kneeling, she inspected the floor, spotting a small crumpled note near the oven. It read, "Add half to batch, midnight." The handwriting was shaky, unlike Elsie's neat script. Was this Peter's doing or someone else's instructions? She tucked the note into her pocket, her mind racing. Poisoned flour could explain the illnesses, but the motive, revenge, sabotage, or profit, remained unclear. Returning to the fete, Miss Marple spotted Peter near the maypole, talking heatedly with a young woman in a floral dress, Clara Dunhill, the florist's daughter, known for her herbal remedies. Their voices were low, but Clara's gesture toward the bakery was sharp. Miss Marple approached, her smile disarming. "Clara, your flowers are lovely today," she said. Clara flushed, murmuring thanks before hurrying off. Peter followed, avoiding Miss Marple's gaze. Their secrecy suggested a connection, perhaps to the herbs outside the bakery. Miss Marple recalled a case in St. Mary Mead, where a herbalist's mistake had caused a rash. Was Clara supplying toxic plants knowingly or not? As the afternoon wore on, Miss Marple visited Dr. Lane's stall, where he offered free health checks to fete-goers. "Any new cases, doctor?" she asked casually. Lane's jaw tightened. "None today, thankfully. But I've warned Elsie to clean her kitchen properly." His tone was sharp, almost defensive, and Miss Marple wondered if he suspected sabotage but feared naming it. She then sought out the Webbs, finding them at a cake stall. Mrs. Webb, her hands still clutching a handkerchief, seemed reluctant to meet her eyes. "Your husband's recovered well, I hope," Miss Marple said. Mrs. Webb nodded, her voice barely audible. "He's fine now, thank you." Harold grunted, pulling her away, but Miss Marple caught a flicker of fear in her eyes. Fear of discovery, perhaps. The Fates games continued, with a tug-of-war drawing cheers. But Miss Marple's thoughts were on the note and the green powder. Someone was deliberately tainting the bakery's goods, using the cursed book as a distraction. Was it Peter acting alone or under orders? Clara's involvement or Dr. Lane's knowledge? The Webb's silence suggested they might be victims or accomplices. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows across the green, Miss Marple resolved to watch the bakery tonight, suspecting the midnight note meant another act of sabotage. The Fates' revelry would mask any mischief, but she would be there, ready to catch the culprit in the act. Chapter 4. The midnight watch, the summer Fates' first day, had faded into a balmy evening in Willoughby Green, with lanterns casting a golden glow across the village green and the distant hum of laughter lingering like a fading melody. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and roasted nuts, but Miss Jane Marple's thoughts were far from the festive cheer. The crumpled note found in the Golden Loaf's kitchen, with its cryptic instruction to add half to batch midnight, had set her senses alight. The green powder in the flour, Clara Dunhill's heated exchange with Peter Finch, and the Webb's guarded demeanour suggested a deliberate plot behind the bakery's cursed reputation. Tonight, under the cover of darkness, Miss Marple resolved to stake out the bakery, certain that the midnight hour would reveal the hand behind the so-called curse. After dinner at Margaret's tea room, where the chatter centred on fate highlights, Miss Marple excused herself, claiming a need for an early night. Instead, she slipped into a dark shawl and sturdy shoes, her knitting bag left behind to avoid encumbrance. The village was quiet as she stepped out, the moon a silver crescent casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The bakery stood at the edge of the green, its shuttered windows like closed eyes, hiding secrets within. Miss Marple settled behind a low hedge near the back door, where the patch of wild herbs grew, their jagged leaves faintly visible in the moonlight. She crouched low, her small frame blending into the shadows, her breathing steady despite the thrill of the chase. The church clock struck 11, its chimes echoing softly, and Miss Marple's eyes adjusted to the gloom. She recalled a night watch in St. Mary Mead, when she'd caught a poacher by a riverbank. Patience, she knew, was her greatest ally. At 11:30, a faint rustle came from the lane, and she tensed, peering through the hedge. A figure approached, cloaked and hooded, moving with cautious steps toward the bakery's back door. The figure paused, glancing around, then produced a key and slipped inside. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Was this Peter, Clara, or someone else entirely? She waited, counting seconds, until a soft light flickered in the kitchen window, barely visible through a crack in the shutters. Creeping closer, Miss Marple pressed herself against the wall, her ear to the door. Faint sounds emerged, clinking glass, the rustle of paper, and a low murmur, as if someone were muttering to themselves. She eased the door open, grateful for its unlocked state, and peered inside. The figure, still hooded, stood at the counter, pouring a fine green powder from a small vial into a sack of flour. The herbal scent she'd noted before was stronger now, sharp and bitter. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Good evening. Might I ask what you're adding to that flour?" The figure spun around, the hood falling to reveal Clara Dunhill's pale face, her eyes wide with shock. The vial slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor, and the green powder scattered like dust. "Miss Marple!" Clara gasped, her hands trembling. I didn't mean any harm." Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her tone gentle but unyielding. "No harm, Clara? People have been ill, and Elsie's livelihood is at stake. Tell me the truth, why are you here?" Clara sank onto a stool, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. After a long pause, she began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was for my father," she said. "He's in debt. His flour shop's failing. Someone offered me money to taint the bakery's goods, make it look like Elsie's fault. They said it'd force her to sell cheap, and father could buy the shop to expand." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. "Who offered you money, Clara?" The girl hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. "I don't know his name. A man from out of town met me at the mill. He gave me the herbs, said they'd cause sickness, not death." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. An outsider, using Clara's desperation. Could it be tied to a larger scheme, perhaps to acquire village property? Before Clara could say more, a creak from the front of the bakery made them both freeze. Miss Marple motioned for silence, guiding Clara behind a stack of flour sacks. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate, and Peter Finch appeared, his face pale in the dim light. "Clara?" he whispered, clutching a small sack. Seeing the shattered vial, his eyes widened. "What's happened?" Miss Marple stepped forward, her presence startling him. "Peter, it's time to explain your part in this," she said. "You've been helping Clara, haven't you? The green stain on your cuff, the note about midnight. You're no bystander." Peter's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. "I didn't want to," he muttered. "Clara begged me to help. She said it was just a prank to scare Elsie, not hurt anyone. I mixed the herbs in, but only a little. Thought it'd just taste bad." His voice broke, and Miss Marple saw genuine remorse. Clara, still trembling, nodded. "He's telling the truth. I got the herbs. He just followed my lead." Miss Marple's mind pieced together the plot. Clara, driven by her father's debts, had been manipulated by an outsider, with Peter as her reluctant accomplice. The cursed book, she suspected, was a distraction, planted to fuel village superstition. Determined to protect the young pair from further trouble, Miss Marple sent them to Margaret's tea room with instructions to wait. She examined the kitchen, finding another vial hidden behind a jar, its contents matching the green powder. The note's handwriting, she realized, resembled Clara's, suggesting she'd written it under duress. As she locked the bakery door, the church clock struck midnight, its chimes a sombre reminder of the stakes. She hurried to the tea room where Clara and Peter sat, heads bowed under Margaret's watchful eye. "We need to find this outsider," Miss Marple said. "Clara, describe him." Clara's voice was shaky. Tall, dark coat, spoke with a city accent. Wore a hat, kept his face shadowed. Said he'd be at the fete tomorrow. Miss Marple nodded, recalling the cigarette butt from the church in her last case, an outsider's mark. Was this the same man, or part of a broader scheme? She sent Clara and Peter home, warning them to stay silent, and returned to her room to jot notes. The fete's second day would bring the village together, and the mysterious man might appear. Miss Marple resolved to watch the stalls closely, ready to unmask the true culprit behind Willoughby Green's cursed recipe book. Chapter 5. The Stranger at the Fete. The second day of the summer fete dawned bright and warm in Willoughby Green, with the village green transformed into a vibrant mosaic of stalls. Laughter and the cheerful clatter of teacups. The air buzzed with the scent of blooming flowers and sizzling sausages, while a fiddler's tune wove through the crowd, drawing villagers into impromptu dances. Yet beneath the festive surface, a thread of tension lingered, tied to the cursed recipe book and the illnesses that had plagued the golden loaf. Miss Jane Marple, her sensible hat shielding her eyes from the sun, stood near a honey stall, her sharp gaze sweeping the crowd. Clara Dunhill's confession about the outsider's bribe, Peter Finch's reluctant role, and the mysterious green powder had sharpened the mystery, and Miss Marple was certain the fate's bustling chaos would draw the true culprit into the open. She had spent the early morning at Margaret's tea room, her pocketbook open as she reviewed the night's revelations. Clara's description of the tall, dark-coated stranger with a city accent, coupled with the hidden vial and the note about midnight tampering, pointed to a calculated scheme. The cursed book, Miss Marple suspected, was a red herring used to mask deliberate sabotage. Was the stranger aiming to ruin Elsie Harper's bakery for profit, perhaps to buy it cheaply? Or was there a deeper motive tied to the village's future? Clara and Peter, now under Margaret's watchful eye, had promised to stay clear of trouble, but Miss Marple knew the stranger's presence at the fete would be the key to unravelling the plot. As the fete kicked off, Miss Marple wandered the stalls, her unassuming demeanour allowing her to blend into the crowd. Children raced past with painted faces, clutching sugar-dusted pastries, while farmers bartered over homemade cider. She spotted Elsie Harper at a charity stall, her face less drawn today, as if determined to reclaim her place in the village. Miss Marple approached, offering a kind smile. "You're looking brighter, Mrs. Harper," she said. Elsie nodded, her voice soft. "Trying to move past it, Miss Marple. But I heard whispers. Someone saw a stranger near my bakery last night." Miss Marple's interest piqued. The timing matched her midnight discovery, confirming the stranger's boldness. The opening ceremony began with Reverend Amos Cole addressing the crowd from a wooden stage, his voice warm but tinged with caution. "Let us celebrate our unity," he said, "and cast aside rumours of curses." The applause was hearty, but Miss Marple noted the uneasy glances exchanged among some villagers, particularly Harold Webb and his wife, who stood near a flower stall. Their silence about their illness suggested fear or complicity. She moved closer, pretending to admire a bouquet, and overheard Mrs. Webb whisper to her husband, "If they find out, we're ruined." Harold hushed her, his face grim, and Miss Marple filed the snippet away. Were they victims of the tainted flower or part of the scheme? Her attention shifted to a man standing apart from the crowd, near a cider tent. Tall, with a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat shading his face, he matched Clara's description perfectly. His movements were deliberate, his eyes scanning the green as if searching for someone. Miss Marple edged closer, pausing at a jam stall to observe. The man lit a cigarette, the brand unfamiliar, its smoke curling in the breeze. She recalled the cigarette butt from her last case, an outsider's mark, and her pulse quickened. This was her quarry, she was certain. As he moved toward the bakery, she followed at a discreet distance, her steps light on the grass. The man lingered outside the golden loaf, its shutters still closed, and glanced around before slipping into the alley beside it. Miss Marple, her heart steady despite the thrill, crept after him, hiding behind a stack of crates. Through a crack in the bakery's back door, she saw him pull a small packet from his coat, another vial perhaps, and tuck it behind a loose brick in the wall. Before she could act, a shout from the green startled him, and he vanished into the alley's shadows. Miss Marple approached the brick, easing it aside to find a vial of green powder, identical to the one Clara had dropped. She pocketed it, her mind racing. The stranger was bold, but careless, leaving evidence in plain sight. Returning to the fete, Miss Marple sought out Dr. Gregory Lane, who was at his health check stall, his face stern as he examined a child's scraped knee. "Dr. Lane," she said, her tone casual, "have you seen a stranger in a dark coat today? He seems out of place." Lane's eyes narrowed, his hands pausing. Plenty of visitors at the fete, Miss Marple. Why do you ask? His defensiveness was subtle but unmistakable, and she wondered if he recognized the man or was protecting him. She thanked him and moved on, spotting Clara near a flower stall, her face pale as she arranged roses. Miss Marple approached, speaking softly. Clara, the man you described, he's here. Did he say why he wanted the bakery ruined? Clara's hands trembled. Only that it'd be bought cheap. He mentioned a company, something about new shops in the village. The fete continued with games and music, but Miss Marple's focus remained on the stranger. She spotted him again near the maypole, now talking to Peter Finch, whose nervous gestures betrayed fear. Miss Marple edged closer, catching fragments of their conversation. "Keep quiet, lad," the man hissed. "It's almost done." Peter nodded, his face ashen, and hurried away. Miss Marple's mind whirred. A company planning to buy the bakery suggested a larger scheme, perhaps to transform Willoughby Green into a commercial hub. The Webbs' whispered fear of ruin now made sense. Were they in debt, pressured to support the scheme? As the afternoon wore on, Miss Marple visited the village hall, where fete records were kept. A quick search revealed a letter from a property firm, Greenvale Developments, proposing to buy several village shops, including the Golden Loaf. The letter was addressed to Harold Webb, suggesting he was their local contact. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Harold's illness might have been a warning or a test. She tucked the letter into her pocket, resolving to confront the Webbs and the stranger before the fate's end. The green powder, the outsider's bribes, and the cursed book were threads in a tapestry of greed, and Miss Marple was determined to pull them loose at tomorrow's closing ceremony, when the village's secrets would come to light. Chapter 6. The Webb's Secret. The sun hung low over Willoughby Green, casting long shadows across the village green as the summer fete's second day wound down, with a lively tug of war and the cheerful clink of cider mugs. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and fresh-baked pies, but Miss Jane Marple's thoughts were far from the festive merriment. The vial of green powder hidden behind the bakery's loose brick, the stranger's whispered threats to Peter Finch, and the letter from Greenvale Developments found in the village hall had tightened the knot of the mystery surrounding the Golden Loaf's cursed recipe book. Harold and Mrs. Webb's whispered fear of ruin suggested they were entangled in the scheme, and Miss Marple resolved to confront them before the fete's final day, certain their secrets would unravel the truth behind the village's troubles. After a quiet supper at Margaret's tea room, Miss Marple slipped out into the twilight, her dark shawl blending with the lengthening shadows. The Webbs lived in a modest cottage on the village's edge, its thatched roof sagging slightly, and its garden overgrown with weeds, a sign of financial strain perhaps. She knocked softly, her demeanour calm but purposeful. Mrs. Webb answered, her face pale and her handkerchief clutched tightly. "Miss Marple," she stammered, "it's late. Is something wrong?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle but firm. "I'd like a word with you and Mr. Webb, if I may. It's about the bakery and the fete." Mrs. Webb hesitated, then stepped aside, her eyes darting nervously. Inside, the cottage was sparsely furnished, with faded curtains and a single lamp casting a dim glow. Harold Webb sat by the hearth, his ruddy face drawn as he puffed on a pipe. "What's this about, Miss Marple?" he asked gruffly, though his voice betrayed unease. She settled into a creaky chair, her gaze steady. "I've learned of a plan to buy the Golden Loaf cheaply," she said, producing the Greenvale Developments letter. "Your name is on this, Mr. Webb, and I suspect your illness wasn't mere chance." Mrs. Webb gasped, her handkerchief fluttering, while Harold's pipe stilled, his eyes narrowing. After a tense silence, Harold spoke, his voice low. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "Greenvale approached me months ago, offered to clear our debts if I helped push Elsie out. They want her shop for a new market square." He rubbed his face, his hands rough from farm work. "They gave me herbs to slip into her flour. Said it'd just make folks queasy, make her look careless. I didn't know it'd be so bad. Mrs. Webb's eyes filled with tears. "We were desperate," she whispered. "The farm's failing, and we've got no savings left. But after Harold got sick himself, we stopped." "We swear," Miss Marple nodded, her mind piecing together the puzzle. The Webbs were pawns, like Clara and Peter, coerced by Greenvale's promises. The stranger in the dark coat, she suspected, was their agent, orchestrating the sabotage to drive down the bakery's value. "Who gave you the herbs?" she asked. Harold hesitated, then muttered, "A man named Carver. Met him at the mill. Said he worked for Greenvale. Tall, city type, always in a hurry." Miss Marple's thoughts flashed to Clara's description of the stranger. A match down to the shadowed hat. The unfamiliar cigarette butt she'd recalled from a past case echoed here. Carver was leaving traces of his presence. Determined to confirm the connection, Miss Marple left the Webbs with a warning to stay silent, promising to handle the matter discreetly. She returned to the tea room where Margaret was tidying up, her face curious. "Any progress, Aunt Jane?" she asked. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "A few more crumbs, dear." In her room, she examined the vial of green powder from the bakery, its bitter scent matching the herbs outside the golden loaf. A quick comparison with a botany book from Margaret's shelf confirmed her suspicion. The powder was derived from foxglove, a plant that could cause nausea and rashes in small doses. Someone with knowledge, perhaps Carver, had chosen it deliberately. The next morning, Miss Marple visited the village post office, where Mrs. Violet Grayson was sorting letters. "Mrs. Grayson," she said casually, "have you seen a man named Carver, perhaps receiving mail from Greenvale Developments?" The postmistress's pince-nez glinted as she frowned. "Can't say I have, but we've had a few letters for a Mr. J. Carver, care of the pub. City postmarks mostly." Miss Marple thanked her, her mind racing. The Thirsty Plough, the village pub, was a hub for gossip and strangers. She headed there next, finding the landlord, Mr. Tompkins, polishing glasses behind the bar. "A Mr. Carver?" he said, scratching his head. "Aye, a tall fellow, dark coat, stayed a few nights last month. Kept to himself, paid in cash." The pub's guest book, which Tompkins showed her, listed a John Carver with a London address. A false one, Miss Marple suspected, but a lead nonetheless. As she left, she spotted Peter Finch delivering a crate of ale, his cap low. She called to him, her tone gentle. "Peter, I know you helped Clara, but have you met a man named Carver?" His face paled and he nodded. "Once at the mill, he gave Clara the herbs, told her what to do. I didn't trust him." His honesty confirmed his minor role, and Miss Marple sent him on his way, her focus now on Carver. Back at the tea room, Miss Marple jotted notes in her pocketbook. The Webb's confession, Carver's presence, and the foxglove powder painted a clear picture. Greenvale Developments was sabotaging the bakery to buy it cheaply, using desperate villagers as tools. The cursed recipe book, she was certain, was a planted distraction, perhaps left by Carver to fuel superstition. The fate's final day, with its closing ceremony, would likely be his last chance to act before the village rallied around Elsie. Miss Marple resolved to watch for him at the ceremony, ready to confront the man behind Willoughby Green's troubles and expose the true curse behind the recipe book. Chapter 7. The Fate's Final Hour. The final day of the summer fete dawned with a gentle breeze rustling through Willoughby Green, stirring the colourful bunting and carrying the sweet scent of blooming roses across the village green. The stalls were alive with activity, laden with glistening jars of preserves, hand-stitched quilts, and baskets of fresh strawberries, while children's laughter mingled with the lively strum of a banjo. Yet beneath the festive cheer, a current of suspicion pulsed, tied to the cursed recipe book and the sabotage at the Golden Loaf. Miss Jane Marple stood near a lemonade stand, her sensible hat tilted against the morning sun, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd for the mysterious John Carver. The Webb's confession, the foxglove powder, and Peter Finch's reluctant admission had exposed a plot by Greenvale Developments to ruin Elsie Harper's bakery, and Miss Marple was certain the Fates closing ceremony would be the stage for the scheme's final act. She had spent the early morning at Margaret's tea room, her pocketbook open as she reviewed her notes. The letter from Greenvale Developments, addressed to Harold Webb, confirmed their intent to buy the bakery cheaply, while Carver's presence at the pub and his bribes to Clara Dunhill and the Webbs revealed a calculated outsider orchestrating the chaos. The cursed recipe book, Miss Marple suspected, was a clever ruse, planted to fuel village superstition and mask the deliberate poisoning with foxglove. Carver's city accent and shadowed hat marked him as a stranger, but his boldness in hiding vials at the bakery suggested he was still in Willoughby Green, ready to strike again. The closing ceremony, with its gathering of the entire village, would be his chance to cement the bakery's ruin or be caught in the act. As the fate bustled, Miss Marple wandered the stalls, her unassuming presence allowing her to observe unnoticed. Elsie Harper had reopened the Golden Loaf stall, a brave move, offering plain rolls to avoid suspicion. Villagers approached cautiously, but Elsie's warm smile drew a small crowd, a sign of hope amid the gossip. Miss Marple paused to buy a roll, her voice kind. "You're holding up well, Mrs. Harper," she said. Elsie's eyes were tired but determined. "I've got to, Miss Marple. Someone's trying to break me, but I won't let them." Miss Marple nodded, noting a faint tremor in Elsie's hands. Fear, but also resolve. She wondered if Carver would target the stall directly, perhaps to sabotage Elsie's comeback. The green was a whirl of activity, with a sack race drawing cheers and a pie-eating contest sparking laughter. Miss Marple spotted Clara Dunhill at her flower stall, arranging lilies with a distracted air. Approaching, she spoke softly. "Clara, have you seen the man in the dark coat today?" Clara's hands froze, her eyes darting. "Not since yesterday, Miss Marple. I swear I've stopped helping him." Her voice was earnest, and Miss Marple believed her, sensing Clara's regret. Nearby, Peter Finch carried a crate of apples, his cap low. Miss Marple caught his eye, and he nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her protection. Their cooperation was a relief, but the real threat, Carver, remained at large. Midday brought the closing ceremony, with Reverend Amos Cole taking the stage beneath a canopy of bunting. The crowd gathered, their faces a mix of joy and wariness, as he spoke of community and resilience. "Let us put aside fear," he said, his voice steady, "and celebrate Willoughby Green's spirit." Miss Marple stood at the crowd's edge, her gaze sweeping for the tall, dark-coated figure. She spotted him near the back, his hat tilted to shade his face, lighting another of his unfamiliar cigarettes. His posture was tense, his eyes fixed on Elsie's stall, where a small line had formed. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. He was planning something, she was sure. Slipping through the crowd, she followed Carver as he moved toward the bakery stall, his hand in his coat pocket. She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead where a pickpocket had been caught by a telltale gesture. Carver's hand suggested he carried another vial. As he neared the stall, Miss Marple signalled to Margaret, who was nearby, to fetch Constable Pulk. Carver paused, pretending to browse a neighbouring stall, then slipped a small packet onto Elsie's table, hidden beneath a napkin. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice clear. "Mr. Carver, I believe you dropped something," she said, lifting the napkin to reveal a vial of green powder. The crowd hushed, eyes turning as Carver froze, his face pale beneath his hat. "I don't know what you mean," he said, his city accent sharp, but his eyes betrayed panic. Miss Marple held up the vial, her tone calm. "Foxglove, I presume. Used to poison Elsie's goods and ruin her business. Greenvale Development sent you, didn't they?" Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Elsie's face drained of colour. Constable Polk arrived, his broad frame imposing, and Carver's bravado crumbled. "It was just business," he muttered. "They wanted the shop cheap for a new market. No one was supposed to get hurt." Miss Marple turned to the crowd, her voice steady. The cursed book was a distraction, planted to fuel your fears. Clara Dunhill and Harold Webb were coerced, but this man acted for profit. Clara, standing nearby, burst into tears, while Harold Webb hung his head. Constable Polk took Carver into custody, promising a full investigation. Elsie approached Miss Marple, her eyes brimming. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I'd lose everything." Miss Marple patted her hand, her mind already tying up loose ends. The book, she suspected, had been left by Carver, its strange symbols mere nonsense to scare the superstitious. As the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed, buzzing with the news. Miss Marple returned to the tea room with Margaret, who poured tea with a grin. "You've saved the day, Aunt Jane," she said. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Just a matter of noticing the crumbs, dear." She jotted final notes in her pocketbook, satisfied that Willoughby Green would heal. The fate had ended, but the village's spirit was restored, and the golden loaf would rise again. Tomorrow, she would board the train back to St. Mary Mead, ready for her roses, and perhaps another mystery. Chapter 8. The village recovers. The sun rose gently over Willoughby Green, bathing the village in a soft golden light as the summer fate's echoes faded into memory. The green, now cleared of stalls and bunting, lay quiet, with only a few scattered petals and crumbs as evidence of the festive whirlwind. The air carried a fresh scent of dew and mown grass, a sign of renewal after the turmoil surrounding the golden loaf's cursed recipe book. Miss Jane Marple, seated at a window table in Margaret's tea room, sipped her morning tea, her sharp eyes scanning the village through the lace curtains. The unmasking of John Carver at the Fates closing ceremony had exposed Greenvale Development's scheme to sabotage Elsie Harper's bakery, but loose ends remained: Clara Dunhill's full story, the Webb's role, and the mysterious book itself. Today, Miss Marple aimed to tie up these threads before returning to St. Mary Mead. After a restful night, Miss Marple had reviewed her pocketbook, where notes on Carver's foxglove vials, the Greenvale letter, and the confessions of Clara and Harold Webb painted a clear picture of greed disguised as a curse. Carver's arrest had sent ripples through the village, with whispers of relief mingling with lingering suspicion. Clara and Peter Finch, though coerced, faced scrutiny, and Miss Marple wanted to ensure their redemption. The recipe book, she suspected, held one final clue. Its origins might reveal how Carver had exploited village superstition. She decided to start with Clara, whose tearful confession suggested deeper motives tied to her father's failing flower shop. Miss Marple walked to the Dunhill cottage, a quaint dwelling overrun with roses, their petals drooping as if mirroring the family's struggles. Clara answered the door, her face pale but less haunted than before. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice soft. "I'm so sorry for everything." Miss Marple's smile was kind but probing. "Clara, you were desperate, but I need the whole truth. How did Carver find you?" They sat in the cramped parlour, where a single vase of wilting lilies stood on a table. Clara twisted her hands, her eyes downcast. "He came to Father's shop months ago buying herbs. Said he knew we were in debt, offered money if I'd help ruin Elsie's bakery. He gave me the book, told me to plant it in the attic, say I found it. The herbs were his too. Foxglove, he called it. I didn't know it'd make people so sick." Miss Marple nodded, her suspicions confirmed. The book was a prop, its strange symbols likely nonsense to scare Elsie and the villagers. "And your father?" she asked. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He didn't know. I hid it from him. Thought I was saving the shop." Miss Marple patted her hand, sensing truth in her remorse. She advised Clara to confess to Constable Polk, promising to vouch for her cooperation. As she left, she noticed a small notebook on a shelf, its pages filled with herbal sketches, Clara's own, not Carver's. It suggested her knowledge was innocent, exploited by a cunning outsider. Next, Miss Marple visited the Webb's cottage, where Harold and his wife sat in tense silence. Mrs. Webb's handkerchief was damp, her eyes red from crying. "We've told the constable everything," Harold said gruffly. "No more secrets." Miss Marple's gaze was steady. "I believe you, Mr. Webb, but why didn't you speak sooner?" Mrs. Webb spoke up, her voice shaky. "We were ashamed. Greenvale promised to save our farm, but after Harold got sick from the flour, we knew it was wrong. We stopped, but the damage was done." Miss Marple nodded, noting their sincerity. Their role, though misguided, stemmed from desperation, not malice. She urged them to help Elsie rebuild trust, perhaps by buying her bread publicly at the market. Returning to the village, Miss Marple stopped at the Golden Loaf where Elsie was scrubbing counters, her face brighter despite the empty shop. "Constable Park says Carver's confessed," Elsie said, her voice hopeful. "But that book, where did it come from?" Miss Marple examined the attic again, finding a loose floorboard where the book had been hidden. Beneath it lay a scrap of paper, a receipt from a London bookbinder, dated 3 months ago, addressed to J. Carver. The book was a custom creation, its cursed recipes crafted to deceive. Miss Marple showed it to Elsie, who gasped. "He planned it all along," she said, shaking her head. Miss Marple agreed, her mind picturing Carver's calculated moves. At the village hall, Miss Marple met Reverend Amos Cole, who was organizing a relief fund for those affected by the illnesses. "The village owes you, Miss Marple," he said warmly. "You've lifted a shadow." She smiled, deflecting praise. "Just a matter of noticing details, Reverend." She asked about Peter Finch, learning he'd apologized to Elsie and offered to work for free to rebuild the bakery's reputation. Peter's youth and regret, Miss Marple felt, deserved a second chance. She advised the Reverend to guide him, perhaps through community service, to restore his standing. As evening fell, Miss Marple visited the post office, where Mrs. Violet Grayson was sorting letters, her gossip quieter now. "Any more mail for Carver?" Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Grayson shook her head. "None since his arrest, but I heard Greenvale's pulling out of the village. No one trusts them now." Miss Marple nodded, satisfied. The company's scheme had collapsed, and Willoughby Green would heal. She returned to the tea room, where Margaret poured tea, her eyes curious. "All solved, Aunt Jane?" she asked. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Nearly, dear. The village just needs time." In her room, Miss Marple added final notes to her pocketbook. Carver's plot, fueled by Greenvale's greed, had exploited desperate villagers, but their confessions had broken the curse's myth. The book, a fabricated relic, was now with the constable as evidence. Tomorrow, Miss Marple would visit Elsie one last time, ensuring the bakery's revival before her train home. The fate had ended, but its lessons lingered. Trust, once broken, could be mended with truth. As she closed her book, she felt a quiet satisfaction, ready for the next day's farewells and the peace of St. Mary Mead. Chapter 9. The bakery's redemption. The morning sun draped Willoughby Green in a warm, golden embrace, its rays filtering through the ancient oaks that lined the village green, casting dappled patterns on the cobblestone paths. The summer fete was over, its stalls and banners packed away, leaving behind a quiet sense of renewal as the village began to heal from the shadow of the cursed recipe book. The Golden Loaf, once the heart of village gossip, stood ready to reopen, its windows unshuttered, and the faint scent of fresh dough wafting into the street. Miss Jane Marple, seated at a corner table in Margaret's tea room, sipped her Earl Grey, her sharp blue eyes scanning the village through the lace curtains. The unmasking of John Carver and the collapse of Greenvale Development's scheme had lifted a weight from Willoughby Green, but Miss Marple knew that mending broken trust required more than an arrest. Today, she aimed to ensure Elsie Harper's bakery would rise again, while tying up the final threads of the mystery: Clara Dunhill's redemption, Peter Finch's future, and the lingering question of the book's true origins. Miss Marple had spent the early hours reviewing her pocketbook, where meticulous notes traced the web of deceit spun by Carver. The foxglove powder, the planted recipe book with its nonsensical symbols, and the coerced confessions of Clara, Peter, and the Webbs revealed a plot rooted in greed. Yet, the village's resilience, Elsie's determination, the Reverend's relief fund, and even the Webb's remorse offered hope. The bookbinder's receipt found in the bakery attic, linking Carver to a London shop, suggested he'd crafted the book as a deliberate prop. But Miss Marple wondered if any accomplices lingered in the village, perhaps unaware of their role. She decided to start her day at the Golden Loaf, to support Elsie's reopening and gauge the village's mood. As she stepped onto the green, the village was stirring to life. Shopkeepers swept their stoops, and children scampered to school, their laughter a stark contrast to the whispers of curses that had plagued the fete. The Golden Loaf's door was propped open, and Miss Marple entered to find Elsie kneading dough, her face flushed with effort but bright with resolve. A small crowd of early customers lingered, their tentative smiles a sign that trust was returning. "Miss Marple," Elsie called, wiping flour from her hands. "You're my first guest today. Try a fresh roll, free of charge." Miss Marple accepted, biting into the warm bread, its crust crisp and its flavour pure. "Delicious, Mrs. Harper," she said, her eyes twinkling. "The village will come around, you'll see." Elsie's smile faltered slightly. "I hope so. Some still look at me sideways, thinking of that book." Miss Marple lingered, helping Elsie arrange trays of buns, and listened as villagers trickled in. Mrs. Violet Grayson, the postmistress, bought a loaf, her usual gossip subdued. "I told everyone you're no witch, Elsie," she said, her pince-nez glinting. "That Carver was a scoundrel." Miss Marple noted the shift in tone, gossip turning to support, and asked, "Any news of Greenvale's plans, Mrs. Grayson?" The postmistress shook her head. "They've gone quiet, thank heavens. No more letters since Carver's arrest." Miss Marple nodded, satisfied that the company's influence was waning, but her mind lingered on the bookbinder's receipt. Was there a trail beyond Carver? Her next stop was the Dunhill cottage, where Clara was tending the garden, her hands busy with pruning shears. The roses, though still drooping, showed signs of care, mirroring Clara's own tentative recovery. "Miss Marple," Clara said, her voice soft but steadier than before. "I've told Constable Polk everything. He says I won't face charges if I help at the bakery." Miss Marple's smile was encouraging. "A wise choice, Clara. But tell me, did Carver mention anyone else? A partner, perhaps?" Clara frowned, thinking. "He said something about a contact in London, someone who supplied the book. Never gave a name, though." Miss Marple's mind raced. A London contact suggested a broader network, but with Carver in custody, the immediate threat was gone. Leaving Clara, Miss Marple visited the village hall, where Reverend Amos Cole was sorting donations for the relief fund. His round face lit up at her arrival. "Miss Marple, you've worked wonders," he said, stacking coins. "The fund's helping those who fell ill, and Elsie's getting support." Miss Marple inquired about Peter Finch, learning he was working at the bakery, sweeping floors and carrying flour sacks to prove his remorse. "He's a good lad at heart," the Reverend said. "Just got caught up," Miss Marple agreed, recalling a young thief in St. Mary Mead who'd turned his life around with guidance. She suggested the Reverend mentor Peter, perhaps through a church project, to keep him on the right path. Midday found Miss Marple at the pub, the Thirsty Plough, where Mr. Tompkins, the landlord, was polishing glasses. She asked to see the guest book again, hoping for clues about Carver's contacts. A new entry caught her eye. A Mr. L. Weston, who'd stayed a week before the fete, with a London address matching the bookbinder's receipt. "Did this Weston meet Carver?" she asked. Tompkins scratched his chin. "Might have. Saw them talking once out back, but Weston left before the trouble started." Miss Marple's lips pursed. Weston could be the book's creator, but without Carver's testimony, it was a loose thread she'd leave to the constable. Returning to the bakery, Miss Marple found Peter Finch stacking crates, his face earnest. "Miss Marple," he said, "I'm trying to make things right. Elsie's teaching me to bake properly." His sincerity warmed her, and she encouraged him to continue, knowing his efforts would help heal the village's wounds. She then sought out Dr. Gregory Lane, who was at his surgery reviewing patient files. "Dr. Lane," she said, "you suspected sabotage early on, didn't you?" He sighed, his stern face softening. "I did, but I couldn't prove it. The symptoms matched foxglove, but I didn't want to stir more panic." His honesty confirmed Miss Marple's trust in him, and she urged him to support Elsie publicly, perhaps by praising her bread at the next market. As evening settled, Miss Marple walked the green with Margaret, who marvelled at the village's recovery. "You've done it again, Aunt Jane," she said, squeezing her arm. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Just a matter of pulling the right threads, dear." At the tea room, she added final notes to her pocketbook. Carver's arrest, Clara and Peter's redemption, the Webbs' cooperation, and the mysterious Weston. The cursed book, a fabricated relic, was now evidence, and Elsie's bakery was poised to thrive. Tomorrow, Miss Marple would say her farewells, confident that Willoughby Green's spirit was restored. But her mind already wandered to the roses waiting in St. Mary Mead, and the next puzzle life might bring. Chapter 10. The Curse. Unravelled, the final morning in Willoughby Green broke with a soft, rosy dawn. The village bathed in a gentle light that seemed to promise healing after the storm of the summer fete. The cobblestone streets glistened with dew, and the air carried the fresh scent of lavender and newly turned earth, as if the village itself were exhaling its relief. The golden loaf stood proudly open, its windows gleaming, and the faint hum of villagers buying fresh bread signalled a return to normalcy. Miss Jane Marple sat at Margaret's tea room, her knitting bag at her side, her sharp eyes reflecting on the mystery of the cursed recipe book. John Carver's arrest had exposed Greenvale Development's plot to ruin Elsie Harper's bakery, but lingering questions about the book's origins, the elusive Mr. Weston, and the village's full recovery demanded closure. Today, as she prepared to return to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple resolved to tie every loose thread, ensuring Willoughby Green's peace was restored and the curse's myth was laid to rest. She had risen early, her pocketbook open on the tea room's table, where her meticulous notes mapped the conspiracy. Carver's foxglove powder, planted in the bakery to sicken customers, had been a tool to drive down the golden loaf's value, orchestrated by Greenvale Developments through bribes to Clara Dunhill and Harold Webb. Peter Finch, a reluctant accomplice, had acted out of loyalty to Clara, while the mysterious recipe book, with its cryptic symbols, was a fabricated prop to fuel village superstition. The bookbinder's receipt and the guest book entry for Mr. L. Weston, a Londoner linked to Carver, suggested a broader network, but with Carver in custody, Miss Marple suspected Weston was a minor player, perhaps the book's creator. Her goal today was to confirm these connections, ensure the village's trust in Elsie was fully restored, and leave no shadow of doubt behind. Miss Marple began her day at the Golden Loaf, where Elsie was shaping loaves, her face radiant with renewed purpose. A steady stream of customers filled the shop, their chatter warm and free of suspicion. "Miss Marple," Elsie said, offering a warm bun, "you've given me my life back. The village is buying again, and I'm baking for next week's market." Miss Marple smiled, biting into the bun, its flavour a testament to Elsie's skill. "You've earned their trust, Mrs. Harper," she said. "But tell me, have you heard anything more about that book?" Elsie shook her head. "Constable Polk has it as evidence. He says it's just old paper, no curse at all." Miss Marple nodded. Her suspicion confirmed. The book was a deliberate fake, crafted to deceive. Her next stop was the village hall, where Reverend Amos Cole was finalising the relief fund for those sickened by the tainted flour. His round face beamed as he counted donations. "Miss Marple, you're a blessing," he said. "The fund's helping everyone recover, and Elsie's stall will be the star of the market." Miss Marple inquired about Clara and Peter, learning they were working together at the bakery, their penance earning village goodwill. "Clara's helping with deliveries," the Reverend said, "and Peter's learning to bake. They're young, they'll mend." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Their redemption was a small victory, reminiscent of a wayward youth in St. Mary Mead who'd found purpose after a theft. Determined to trace the book's origins, Miss Marple visited the post office, where Mrs. Violet Grayson was sorting mail, her gossip now tempered by gratitude. "No more letters for Carver or that Weston," Mrs. Grayson said, her pince-nez glinting. "But I found this, slipped behind a drawer." She handed Miss Marple a crumpled note, addressed to Weston, with instructions to deliver a leather-bound book with symbols to Carver at the pub. The handwriting matched the bookbinder's receipt, confirming Weston's role as the book's supplier. Miss Marple thanked her, her mind piecing together the final puzzle. Weston, likely a hired craftsman, had created the book under Carver's orders, a prop to amplify the curse's myth. Next, she sought out the Webbs at their cottage, where the garden showed signs of care, with weeds cleared and fresh soil turned. Mrs. Webb greeted her, her face less strained, though her handkerchief remained clutched. "We've told everyone we were wrong," she said. "Harold's buying Elsie's bread today to show it." Harold, emerging from the shed, nodded gruffly. "We were fools, Miss Marple. Greenvale promised us a way out, but we've learned our lesson." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "You've made amends," she said. "Help Elsie, and the village will forgive." Their sincerity echoed a case in St. Mary Mead, where a farmer's confession had healed a feud, and she felt confident their support would bolster Elsie's recovery. At midday, Miss Marple visited Dr. Gregory Lane's surgery, where he was updating patient records. His stern face softened at her arrival. "You've done wonders, Miss Marple," he said. "No new cases since the fete?" She asked about the foxglove symptoms, probing his early suspicions. "I knew it wasn't just bad flour," he admitted, "but I couldn't point fingers without proof." "You found it where I couldn't." Miss Marple nodded, appreciating his candour. "Speak up for Elsie at the market," she suggested. "Your word carries weight." He agreed, promising to buy a loaf publicly, a gesture that would seal the village's trust. Her final stop was the bakery, where Clara and Peter were stacking trays, their faces earnest. Clara approached, her voice shy. "Miss Marple, I'm helping Elsie for free to make things right." Peter nodded. "Me too, I'm learning her recipes. The real ones." Miss Marple's smile was warm. "You're both on the right path," she said. She spoke briefly with Constable Palk, who confirmed Carver's confession. He'd acted alone in the village, with Weston supplying the book from London for a fee. The case was closed, Greenvale's plans abandoned, and the book, a mere prop, would be destroyed. As evening fell, Miss Marple walked the green with Margaret, the village settling into a peaceful hum. "You've saved Willoughby Green, Aunt Jane," Margaret said, squeezing her arm. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Just a matter of sifting the flour, dear." At the tea room, she packed her bag, her pocketbook complete with the final truth. Carver's greed, fueled by Greenvale, had exploited desperate villagers, but their remorse and Elsie's resilience had prevailed. The train to St. Mary Mead awaited, and as she boarded, Miss Marple felt a quiet satisfaction, ready for her roses and the next mystery life might bring. If you've loved this tale of intrigue, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep your eyes open for the secrets in your own village.